Welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, psychic medium Cari Mugz. This is where we learn all things spirit, everything from spiritual gifts, awakenings, ghosts, aliens, and starseeds. Nothing is untouchable, but always fun and spunky. I am honored to be on this spiritual journey with you, so make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Hey guys, just a heads up on this video. I recorded this video on my phone for the first time in an interview, and I turned it in landscape position like I usually do for my podcasts when I do them solo, but Zoom messed me up and Zoom puts it in horizontal. I'm in a horizontal position. I'm in an upright position. My guest is fine, but I'm not. So if that's going to bother you watching this video, then I suggest you listen to it. Just listen to it. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix it. I tried to fix it for like an hour and figured, you know what? You guys know me. You know I mess up. People mess up. So if you can't handle the horizontal me and then the vertical of my guest, then I'll give you a link down at the below so you can just go listen to it. It's an amazing podcast interview about writing your own story and how that helps you heal, and how if you want to publish a book, this interviewer, she can help you. So full disclosure, videos goes horizontal, then vertical. So I messed up. I won't do it again. It was a lesson learned, but I love you guys. Thanks for putting up with me, and thanks you for being patient with me. Hey, Meg, welcome to the Spunky Spirit Podcast. Now, first off, I want to read your bio because I think it is amazing. I think it's hilarious. So, Maggie Lee. So if I get anything wrong, let me know. But Maggie Lee Calvin is an Amazon best-selling author, wife, mom, master air guitar player. That's like my favorite. Speaker and coach who helps spiritually attuned go-getters write, market, and sell their Amazon best-selling books on Kindle, paperback, and Audible. She is best known for her intuitive gifts, which I love, unconventional practices that help writers become creatively unblocked, and her award-worthy performance as a tree in A Midsummer's Night Dream as a third grader. That is also my favorite. I love that. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I was curious about your daughter's wedding. Did they have a dessert bar, like the new trend, or do they have an actual wedding cake?
They had an actual wedding cake, but they did serve dinner to everybody. It was nice. It was fun. The dessert was just the wedding cake. It was just the wedding cake, but it was good. Yeah, it was way good. It was awesome. Like a great end to the summer for me. Great. Like now we're getting into the fall. So yeah, it was good.
So glad.
Yeah. So the thing I'm most excited about is, one, I do have a lot of clients and listeners out there that do want to write their own book. And so this is perfect because even I want to kind of write my own book too, about how, my journey to mediumship, going from a pretty strict religion to going to writing a book. But I have a lot of clients out there that want to do the same. But my favorite too that I want to talk about a lot too is just writing how you feel like writing your story can be very healing, because I know a lot of my clients and listeners are going through shadow work and things like that. So first off, tell me a little bit about like who you are, how you decided to do this. And I want to talk about your intuitive gifts too, but all of that in summary. Let's go to first, how did you start this work and what did you do to get here?
Yes. May this be the shortest version possible. Cliff notes of the journey.
Right.
Very, very similar to you, raised very religiously, Protestant, mainline Protestant.
Yeah.
And overcame big T trauma in early childhood. And so when I was 6, met God, source, the divine, whatever word we want to use for that, experienced the palpable healing presence of God as a 6-year-old, as the only white girl in an all-black gospel choir.
Wow.
And my mom's secretary got me to sing with her in. And so that sparked something in me. Already sang too much. And so fell in love with the church, felt safe in the church, loved the church, was getting applause and affirmation for singing and preaching. And that applause and affirmation was filling a hole. You probably know where this is going, that wasn't meeting needs that weren't being met at home. And so applause in that season for my family. So applause became synonymous to love for me. At 13, I began preaching. Now I know that I was channeling. I didn't have that vocabulary then.
Yeah, because same with me when I was little. You don't know back then. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
And so my grandparents were missionaries, and they would carry me around as a show pony, and I would preach and sing at 13 and at these conferences and churches and mission trips. A lot of good came from that season. I was in that season until I was 32. So from 13 to 32, I went in between that time, went to seminary, was a minister, loved studying in seminary, how to write curriculum and pastoral care.
And don't you think too, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no,
when you're kind of in that, it does feel good, right? Like that really does, because it does have some good qualities or some good, and you feel like you're doing the right thing, and you feel, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that it's bad, but you feel like there's just these moments where you just feel like everything's so good. You know what I mean? You feel like do you know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yes, it served me. It served me then. And
yes, exactly.
My soul definitely agreed to all of it, even the hard stuff, and that might ruffle feathers, but my soul agreed to all of it 100%.
Yeah, mine did too at the time, because that's what I needed at the time.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Yes.
Totally. Well, when I was 28, I went to the same grandmother who basically groomed me to be a pastor. She took me on this somatic Enneagram retreat. I was 28. I already said that. And on that retreat, it was very healing. Holy moly, phenomenally healing. I was asked a very simple question, but to me, it was everything. The facilitator asked me in front of everyone, mind you, which is what happens on retreats.
Right.
I was asked, what is one thing that you could do, Meg, if no one ever was to know you did it and never applaud you for it? It would still bring you an immense amount of pleasure, and you lose all track of time. What is that thing? And without missing a beat, I said it would be writing. And then I also was awakened. I wanted to be a mom at that point. So that awakened me to the fact that I had been vocationally living from a place of impressing, appeasing, defending, and not from pleasure, and not from joy, and not from flow.
Right. For the outside approval. The outside approval. Yes. That's what that's crazy. It's kind of the same, very similar to me too. Like I always wanted that outside approval. And honestly too, one of my goals was to be a mom, be a mom. And so it's kind of weird how we kind of have the same, synchronized backgrounds. I totally get it. But yes, trying to figure out why we need that outside applause is really, really one of the steps, I think, one of the biggest steps to shadow work, if that's one of your issues, right? Because there are some people out there, don't you think there's some people out there that don't care what other people think? And I wish I sometimes had that ability, but I am not one of those people. Sorry. Yes. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad you are. I appreciate it. I'm going to tell every podcast host who I guess on their show, can you be like Cari and just have a conversation with me instead of me giving you my documentary of my life? And
I know, right? Because I have to be like, oh, wait, I have a story.
Yes.
So pretty. Okay, so you're 28. You decided that you knew what you wanted to do then. So you kind of were not in the right, you weren't there, like you weren't so you knew now what you wanted to do. So what'd you do after that?
Yes. So I became a mom, and then I started, when my daughter was 1, I started my first book, and it got picked up by a publishing company 2017.
Nice. That's good.
February. And I was not aware of my intuitive gifts yet. I had not remembered them yet at this point of the story. I will say this though, my whole life, I always felt that Jesus and the Christian church as we know it today was telling part of the story. My grandmother gets a lot of credit for that, because she had me reading Joan Chittister, Marianne Williamson, Richard Rohr at a very young age.
Yeah.
she opened me up to that truth. And I appreciate that, because it made crossing over into the metaphysical world and meeting my guides and studying chakras and past life regression.
All of that.
All easier. Of it easier. Yes.
I agree. I think that the religion really helped me ask a lot of questions of, if you can't answer this, where do I find the answer? Or where can I, I'm always asking questions. Well, why? Why does this happen? Where does this go? And I think that ultimately the religion led me to that. It led me to my gifts. Well, in all reality, I went to the religion because I thought my gifts were evil, to be honest. And so, but when I went to the religion and started asking these questions, I kind of realized that it wasn't that. So very, very, I needed that. Again, we're saying we needed that step to get to where we were, right? So that's awesome. So now so you wrote your first book and got it published. That's kind of amazing. Good job.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes. Yes. I submitted it to 8 publishing companies, and
wow.
they take a while to get back to you. And in that point, I was impatient. I thought, I'm going to self-publish this. And
oh, good.
It was extremely difficult. So I gave up. And,
oh.
And so I heard back from 2 publishing companies that they wanted it. And I chose one. And after that book was picked up, I began hearing from other people that they also had really healing and helpful and positive books inside of them, but they had limiting beliefs around monetizing their gifts, around marketing being slimy or egotistical,
right,
around their target audience or their talent. And so,
and I kind of publishing always was a big, because now I think, I'm not sure what we're going to talk to you about this, but I think self-publishing is a lot easier than it used to be. And so, and that's kind of the way to go now, because back in the day, that's self-publishing was kind of it was kind of almost self-sabotage. You had to have a publisher, right? Or that's what people made you think, right? Yeah. So you were learning about all these people that had their stories.
Yes. And I was also coaching other ministers at the time to prevent burnout and compassion fatigue, which is really funny or ironic, because I was vocationally evolving and getting burnt out. Not burnt out, just my body was telling me it's time. This is cocoon discomfort. It's time to break out.
Yes.
And, so in March, a friend asked me, will you always be in this church? Because I'd been in the same church for 15 years. And before that moment, before the book came out, I would have said, yes, I'm going to retire here.
Me too. Mm-hmm.
And then I literally said to her, something is coming. I don't know what it is, but something is coming. And so now I know that was my intuition. Then I didn't have that word for it. And I wouldn't even say precognition. It was just this deep inner knowing, I guess, claircognizance that something is coming. Then in March, there was a situation that helped me be able to say, from a place of integrity, I love you all, and it's time for me to leave, without burning down any bridges or burning any bridges or anything. So then I started my second book, which was, I describe it as like Seth Meyers and a nun conceived a book baby together. And it's self-help, and it tells my story. And
is Seth Meyers is that the channeling Seth? Who is Seth Meyers?
He's a comedian from Saturday Night Live. He has his own show now.
Oh, that's right. You love Saturday Night Live. I was going to ask you about that.
Yes, I'm obsessed with it.
That's right. Okay, good. Okay, that's Seth Meyers. So you write kind of a funny Seth Meyers. Okay, go ahead. I just was like, I don't know who Seth Meyers is.
Yes. So
okay,
it's
thank you.
Definitely dry and self-deprecating, and it tells this story. I am my own sanctuary, how a recovering holy roller found healing and power. That came out in 2019. December. And then in January of 2020, I launched my business. I left the church, and I knew I needed, I had this insane spiritual enlightening moment with a past life regression. And
I want to ask a little bit too, and this is kind of maybe off the subject for just a second, but leaving the church. I do have a lot of listeners that are kind of going through a faith crisis of some sort, or trying to leave their religion. And that wasn't an easy thing, right? Was it easy for you? Because most of the time it's not for people, but I want to kind of know what your experience was a little bit. Was that like okay, this is what I'm going to do so I know? Or was this like kind of like a little bit at a time thing for you?
Oh,
sorry. Is that too deep?
I'm thinking the shortest way to answer it, as always.
That's okay. You're good.
I'm like an erupting encyclopedia most of the time.
Okay.
It was hard.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful. I was thinking, I had a feeling you would ask this question, and shadow work, basically because
Definitely.
you told me shadow work was very important. It was also important for me, and I think this might help others that are in a place similar. It was helpful to me when I saw people who had a life like I wanted my life to look, to reach out to them and ask them questions about how they got there.
Right.
Those people that were most helpful to me, that were kind of a lighthouse, were those that were also diehard, overcommitted, overworked Christians that had also had spiritual awakenings where they stepped into the metaphysical world as well. And that was helpful to me to talk with them.
That community. Yeah, I think that's important too. Yeah.
Totally.
Good.
And then I just had I had the moment that started it all was this, my daughter, who was 4 at the time, she's now almost 10, but she was 4 at the time. She had a dream and spoke over me something. And that awakened me to this
total validation
world. Yes, total validation. And then I was able to reach out to a friend who was already very metaphysical, and in the advice he gave me. And so that led to me releasing this book that called out purity culture, that talked about sex and body image and shame and guilt and scars from the church. And then I wrote the book, and then I wrote, as for most authors, I've noticed, I've been honored to serve 54 since I started my business.
That's
almost
amazing.
5 years ago.
Good
So
for
amazing.
You. That's awesome.
Thank you. I've noticed that there often is the voice of the inner critic isn't theirs. It is usually, I know people already think it's usually a guardian or parent, a mentor, a pastor or teacher. There's someone else in their head that they're really the culprit for their writer's block. Not all of the time.
Do you think that they show that's part of their ego that's trying to keep them safe, that's showing up as that person? Or do you think that it's like, do you really think that it's like part of just that thing that they don't want to, the symbolism of that thing? So do you think it's part of their, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Do you think it's really them blocking themselves with their ego, trying to keep them safe, and that's the symbolism they use? Or do you think it's just something in their trauma that's symbolized that way? That's kind of a hard question, huh? I guess we wouldn't know really, but it's there, obviously, right?
Yes. What's coming to me is, from my experience, the subconscious speaks in symbols and memories, and it doesn't.
So it's part of the trauma. It's part of the trauma that has a symbolism to it.
Yes. But I think and the ego, I agree, is that was a safety mechanism at that point in their life to survive that relational system. And that voice was attached to it because they, from my experience.
Because the ego can show up as different things like that, trying to keep us safe, the ego doesn't want us to expand, right? So that's so that's what I think too. That's the biggest thing, I think, too. So, thank you for answering that. Just because I want people to be aware, a lot of my listeners, that leaving from one belief to another isn't always an easy thing. It's not always like one day I decided to just go. And do you know what I mean? That in transition, you could probably write a book on just that alone, probably.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And as you've made very clear on your other episodes, it feels, even though it's uncomfortable, it still felt like home when I signed up for my first class to develop my intuitive gifts. When I paid for my first quantum healing hypnotherapy journey, it never felt heavy or dense or tense or scary. It felt like home.
And their validation, like you got from the daughter's dream, like when you go into that, get that validation from spirit, which is awesome. Yes.
So much so. And then really the last thing I'll say on this question, I think it might help listeners to know that anything healthy grows. And that sometimes, most of the time, means that you will outgrow mentors, and that is okay. You can love them and thank them and let them orbit away like a planet. And if they're meant to orbit back, they will. but you have also most likely outgrown them. And that was my experience with the book, that I had to outgrow 2 Christian mentors in my life.
I see.
And that is that I can do that from a place of integrity, and so can your listeners. It means nothing that they are healthy and they're evolving and growing.
To be honest, I have to be 100% because I'm just like, so I like to be very, I don't even know what the word is, but very transparent. That message was actually probably for my listeners, but very much for me today too. So thank you for that.
So glad.
Thank you. So you're on your second book, right? And this one, now what was this one? This is the Seth Meyers one, the one where, yes. Okay, go ahead. I just keep interrupting you and I'm sorry. Keep going.
It's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect. I was so fortunate. My best friend from childhood is an amazing business coach. And he reached out with my second book and said, do you think you could help me write a book for my business, to grow leads and all that business jargon we use, if I make you a master of organic social media marketing and building a brand? And I said, 100%, let's do it. And so he gets a lot of credit for my business taking off. And when I first started, I'll pause. I knew it was time to leave the church. I went to a friend who had another nonprofit. And I said, I'm vocationally evolving. I just want something for like 2 years so I can start my coaching business. So I need a bridge. These are the skills I offer you. And he hired me on the spot, thankfully. And he was a connection that my grandmother introduced me to when I was 12, I think a soul group for sure. Right. So I worked there for 2 years, director of engagement, doing marketing with online Christian course creators while I started my business. And when I first started my business, my offer was I wanted to help other recovering holy rollers, if you will, very religious people who, like I said, had limiting beliefs around marketing or monetizing their abilities. And I wanted to help them. And they believed ambition was good and holy, that it could be good and holy. They had a high frequency of service to others, and their books were explicitly spiritual. So that was when I first started. And all that I did was help them write their book. Nonfiction was when I started, and then submit queries to publishing companies. And that was 2020. And that was awesome. And then in 2021, as you said, a lot has changed. Mm-hmm. I realized, oh my goodness, it was so sad to me to see how the authors I was serving, how their books were so censored. I had a client who had a moment of a memoir, and the publishing company said, we can't talk about that in our books. Please remove this scene from your memoir. So I was so frustrated. She didn't do it. She came back to me and my team took care of it for her. But I was frustrated by the lack of royalties, the lack of rights, and the lack of just the censorship rules. And I realized by that point, I knew enough, and I knew what I didn't know, to bring on a team of people. So I have 6 people now. And we take care of, since 2021, we take care of everything that an author needs to write, market, and sell their Amazon best-selling book on Audible, Kindle, and paperback, going self-published. So instead of 86 cents for every $14 book they sell, they get to keep 40 to 70% of the royalties and all the other benefits, and everything's a true partnership. The cover design choice. And of course they get me in my zone of genius.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The unblocking and the marketing and the brand building. And then the rest of my team takes care of the rest for them. So that was my journey. And now I would say my target audience has changed since 2020 to where there are wonderfully authors all over the theological spectrum. So a boudoir photographer that dabbles in Buddhism, and then a very conservative Baptist preacher with a heart of gold. And as I shared, I've worked with
still very high frequency though. Very high frequency people. Yeah. Like that's still, it's so funny because it's just about intention, right? Your intention is to help other people raise the frequency. So it doesn't really matter if it's in a religion or, you know what I mean? Like it's just very, very much high frequency. So now, do you actually, so people who want to write books, so are there 2 different things? So people who actually want to write books and publish them and put them out there, do you do you help them through the process and then help them market them or put them on Amazon and all? And then do you also just help people who just want to write their story without it getting published? Are there two, do you do both of those things or just the publishing thing?
All of it. I have
All of
11 different offerings or packages. So
Gosh.
whatever the author wants, whatever, sometimes they have an idea on a Post-it note. This is a book. And sometimes they have a finished manuscript, and we do everything they need. I give them, and like an all-exclusive resort with my team. And so I'm so thankful for the time I had working with traditional publishing companies and learning from
because
them.
you learned it, right?
Yep.
And now you know it. So
yes.
I kind of have two questions. I think they can how, and they might be, so they might be just the same question, but how do you feel? So I know when you reached out and when we talked about doing this podcast, and you really feel strongly that people telling their story is a very healing mechanism. And I totally agree with that. And because it's kind of different than automatic writing, right? Like automatic writing is you connecting, but at the same time, it's you connecting, but you're writing your story. So explain to me how you feel like, because I totally agree with you, but why do you feel like writing your story, even if you're not going to publish it, is a very healing process for you, for people?
Yes. You'll come to know this about me, that I will sometimes answer by sharing about a comedian.
And you're totally fine, because I think that's hilarious.
So there is this amazing show called Ghost. It was original. Have you seen the American version of Ghost on NBC?
I haven't. So you're not talking about
what was
the sitcom? No. Okay. Is that the one where they all live with a couple?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I have seen some of those.
Mm-hmm. So it was a British show first. Calm down, Meg, calm down. And it's a group of comedians. They're called Them There. They've been writing together for 9 years. I've already said too much. Anyway, there's a character on that show whose name is golly bum. I can't think of his last name, but his name is Ben, and he plays a World War II British soldier. He's obviously a ghost. Mm-hmm. And when the show first started, he was interviewed, and about who was his muse for his character. And as he shared, it was obvious that there were many men in his life when he was a kid that were this soldier that weren't kind to him. They were you could tell it was an abusive relationship. And he was, being a comedian, taking the power away from it. He was poking fun at it. And this was right when the show started. Well, 4 or 5 years go by. The show has come to an end this year, and they interviewed him again, and he was tearing up, saying goodbye to this character that he had been playing. And it was obvious that after 5 years of revisiting certain memories that he had to get in character, and trying on the values, the motives, the quirks, the backstory, the pain of that antagonist, he forgave them and had love for them and let them go. I only share that story to say I have noticed that whenever I write for a memoir, or when I guide another author, if I hold a sacred space for them to write, that when they revisit it, sometimes the book is coming up. Now it's talking to us. It's saying 2025, publish me then. It's because your higher self, my experience, my opinion, the higher self believes you're ready to forgive that memory, that person. And by revisiting the story, sometimes, from my experience with authors, it has led to a letter being written to that person, maybe not even being sent, an actual sweaty palm conversation with that person that did cause harm.
Right.
The book's a vehicle for forgiveness, even if the book is never published to serve other people. But you get to see that memory from a different perspective.
Like as third person, kind of, right? And how you were involved in it too. And you just were doing, that's actually brilliant. I love that. I think that that's amazing. And I can totally see that, because that's how a lot of people, just seeing it in third person, you see yourself and you see how you couldn't have really handled, you just handled it the best way you could have at the time, right? Like that's like, that's awesome. So
oh, sorry. Can I say one more thing?
No, go ahead.
In a memoir, one of the rules is this is also very healing, is the best memoirs, the author doesn't offer commentary or analysis in the moment. They just let the reader watch that movie scene and come to their own opinion about the scene. And that can also be very healing in regards to the author reframing the story and not very, from my experience, not justifying or saying that was, we come in writing our memoir, especially about trauma and hard things that we overcame.
Yes.
We come in with a healthy balance of, I was the victim, but I'm also a survivor.
Right.
And so balancing those frequencies when writing is all making a conscious choice to write it from that headspace and heart space is also very, very healing, even if no readers get the gift of your book.
Right. Here's my problem. So I want to ask you a little bit about this, because I saw on one of your posts the other day on Instagram, it was something to the effect of a lady was writing a book, but she wasn't putting everything in it because she wanted to hold back because of what either others would think, family would think, or things so I don't even know what I'm trying to ask. So if you were going to publish a book, are there some things, I mean, you can write it. My biggest fear is that I'm going to write all of my deepest, dark shadow stuff and someone's going to find it. Like, oh my gosh, do you know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? So when you write a book and you want it published, do you need to just like put it out? I mean, I guess you don't put it out all on just for everybody to see. You have to like edit some of it, right? But my thing is some of the stories I need to tell, I don't feel like I can quite yet because of who would read it. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So is a book like a calling, and you're just like, because some people are like, it called to me, and I kind of feel like that too. I know I'm supposed to write it, I just don't know when, and I don't know. So I kind of put it off, and I know that I need to be doing it, but I'm also thinking there's some things I need to put in there, but I don't know if I can do that quite yet. Does that make sense to you? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yes. One of my favorite exercises to do when this comes up in myself, I'm working on my third book now, and in authors, one of my favorite things to do for this specific moment that happens a lot. There's a comic that I always quote. I'm going to butcher his name though. It's not Jason Alexander, because I'm pretty sure that's George from Seinfeld, but his name is
that's George
not
from
him.
Seinfeld.
Jason Aaron, it doesn't matter. There's a comic book art, and he has this quote that says, "You must write like your parents are dead." And so this is very normal. So my favorite exercise to do is we have two different versions of the same exact vignette or chapter. In one version, we write it as though the person we're afraid of offending is in the room and is hovering and is watching us write it. And then we write a second version of that same exact chapter as if that person is very, very happy and supportive. Or if it even helps, they'll have to pretend they will never read it. Margaret Atwood says that as well, to write. The only way to write the truth is to write with your dominant hand and then imagine erasing it with the non-dominant hand. And then with those two exercises, one pretending like they've seen it and they hate it and they're mad at you. And the other is if they're applauding you, they're so thankful and it's been healing for them to read it. And then we reflect, how did your body feel when you were writing the second one? How was your state of flow when you're writing the second one? And which one do you want to keep? And most 99.9% of the time, the author chooses to keep the second one, where they wrote from a place of, I am supported in writing this. And then we have the second step, which is a sweaty palm conversation needed if the person is safe to be around? Or is this a write a letter, burn it, or
right.
Something needs to happen after the chapter's written? And then the third step is, let's say that person is never going, like, I want to release this second version of this chapter where I wrote as though I was fully supported and the person loved it. But in this 3D human experience, that person is never going to support this. Now what do I do? So then we get to do a guided exercise. We get to do a journaling exercise or a meditation together, or some other unconventional practice where we come home to the fact that we are, as you already know, divinely loved, divinely supported, no matter what. And we need to reframe that story with this, in our relationship with this person. And then the last step would be, okay, I'm going to release this puppy. What names do I need to change? Or, I'll pause. How does any of that feel?
That's fascinating, actually. I love that because I think that that's some of the reason why a lot of my clients, I mean, just writing a book is overwhelming anyway. So I love that you, like, basically you pretty much guide and coach the whole experience of the experience of what they want to do. If they want to do it for healing, you'll guide and coach that way. If they want to write a book, you'll guide and coach that way. Like, and so they're like, because so many people want to do this or write their story, or even if they just want to leave it for their family, right? Like
Yes.
yes. And so, but they don't even know where to start, or they feel like it's so overwhelming. And so I love that you go through the whole process with them. And I love too that it is unconditional. I love that you tap into spirit and you tap into your intuition. I love that, I could totally tell during some of these questions that I asked you, you totally paused and tapped into your intuition to ask them and to get the answers. So it's not like you're just doing, I mean, there are basic steps, obviously, but I love that for each client or for each person that you will tweak those basic steps for their needs or for their spirit or where they're at or it is kind of like coaching a sport, honestly, just like kind of like coaching, here's how you're going to do it. And I think I think a lot of my listeners will love that, just for the reason, even if they don't want to publish, that they're trying to go through this awakening or they're trying to go through this and they need to process some of that stuff. And so I am so excited that you're here and that you get to bring that to them. So where can they find you? I'll put everything about you in the show notes. That'd be done. But where else can they find you? Or what other things, like, do you have any other services that you provide, or where can my listeners find you?
Yes. So I would love to give your listeners, I have a free training that is 5 ways to know your first book, or 5 ways to know which book to write first. So whether you have too many ideas, you're like, I don't know which one to write first, or you're thinking, what is my first book idea? I'm not clear on it yet. I have a free training for that. And so it's a video training with just one printable action sheet that I advise you to write in while you watch the video. I'll say, pause the video, write this down, answer this question. And so if they go to megcalvin.com, it's right there, and they can have that to guide them through releasing their healing and helpful book into the world. And then, of course, Instagram at Hey Meg Calvin.
Hey Meg Calvin. Good. Awesome. Okay. That's so awesome. I'm so glad that you I'm so glad that we did this, because I was so interested, but I just know that so many of my clients are, and I just think it's a beautiful thing. I think that writing, it's just an art, right? Like, it's either writing or whatever it is that you're called to. And I know lots of my clients are called to writing. And so thank you so much for being on today's show. And is there anything else that you want to leave with? That's such a hard question because there's so many.
Like, I have a short answer. You'll like it.
Okay, good.
I will leave by quoting the Sufi poet Rumi, who says, remember, that which you seek is also seeking you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Okay. I love it. And thank you for joining us today. And
my pleasure.